So today I'm going to talk about fear foods in recovery from an eating disorder. I haven't got a video about this at all, which is surprising since it's such a huge topic. I guess it's very similar to breaking eating disorder habits and anxiety management, which are obviously two videos that I've done. So it's going to be covering the same ground, but I did want to make it about fear foods specifically. And again, this isn't an edited video, so there'll be lots of ums and pauses and probably lots of mistakes. But moving on to the subject at hand, obviously fear foods are immensely common among people with restrictive eating disorders. Foods that people won't go near, won't eat, are absolutely terrified of for various reasons. So when you're in recovery, these obviously have to be faced and overcome so that you can have a healthy relationship with all food and don't have any anxiety around any food at all, hopefully. I mean, that is the ultimate aim, habits-wise and eating-wise. So when you come across these foods, you're obviously going to be feeling very anxious, and the thing is you have to do it anyway. If you want to overcome your fear of these particular foods, then you have to face the anxiety that you feel when you eat them, or even when you're presented with them or see them, or you're in the same room as them, anything like that. This has to be overcome by facing the fear, because what happens is the more you respond to a fear and the more you run away from it, the more reinforced it is in the mind. So if it elicits an anxiety response from you, and then you respond to that anxiety response, the brain says, okay, well, that was obviously something to be afraid of, and it will make you more afraid next time, which is kind of how these anxieties are created in the first place. So, you know, you might have started becoming anxious around food for one reason or another, and because you responded to that anxiety by not eating or avoiding these foods, especially around certain types of foods, the brain clicks into, okay, so this is a threat, so I need to avoid this in future, so I will create more of a fear response next time. And this just builds up until it's just a complete mess of terror every time you are faced with something like, you know, the foods that you are afraid of. And each time you are then presented with this food, or you feel like you have to eat it or someone is making you eat it, your brain goes straight towards that fear response, because it's a learned response in the brain. So these connections that have been made in the brain, it jumps to them. That is the path that it takes. And I talk about paths in my anxiety management video and article, because the more you take this path, the more it wears through. So for example, if you're a dog walker or a walker in general, and you go out and there is a completely overgrown field and a path going to the right, let's say, you're going to take the path. It's a well-worn route, and this is what happens when you are afraid of something and it continues that fear response. You just wear through this path, and it's easier for the brain to jump to it, because that's the easy path to take. It's the one that's well-worn, well trodden. So if you then want to create another response, an alternate response that your brain will start jumping to, it means treading through this overgrown mess. There is no pathway that has been created yet for this response, so you need to make it, which means that you face the fear, and your brain will start to recognize over time, this takes a long time, but it will start to recognize that this actually isn't something to be afraid of, because you continue to put yourself in a position where you're facing it, and you continue to push through the anxiety, eat the food, and then realize that nothing dramatic happens because of it. It's really, you know, your mind is creating this catastrophe that's going to happen if you actually eat it. This huge catastrophe in your head is creating this fear response, because your brain is saying, oh God, something really terrible is going to happen if I eat this food, because it's so magnified as a fear response. But if you then push through that and you have it, and obviously you are going to be faced with very difficult emotions and feelings and anxiety and self-loathing and maybe anger and disgust and all these kind of things that people can feel after they've face something that's very scary, because the eating disorder will be mad about it, and it will be mad. But the more you face these things, the more the path becomes trodden in a different direction. So your brain will eventually not jump to this path of fear and anxiety, because you have continuously faced this fear. You are saying, I will face this fear, I'm not running away from it, and nothing bad is happening after I've eaten this food. Nothing, I haven't died. And the brain will eventually recognize this, that you are facing a fear and actually nothing's happened because of it, therefore it's not scary, and eventually that anxiety will start to lessen, and the path well trodden will eventually become that one of non-anxiety. Of course, that takes time, that takes a lot of time, that does take 10, 20, 30, 40, 100 times of facing that fear food, but the more you do it, the easier it will become. And no, when I say the more you do it, the easier it will become, it's not going to be like you face it 3 times in a week and each time it suddenly becomes a huge amount easier. Each time you face it, it will probably feel as scary as the first time, but when you've done it 30 times, you'll look back at how fearful you were the first time you did it, and you will see how much that has changed and how it is a lot easier. But of course, this means putting in a lot of hard work. It means not only facing the fear food and eating it, it means not responding to the anxiety to do something to compensate afterwards, because that's still saying, yes, that was a scary thing to do, and now something bad has happened because now I've had to do XYZ. So it does mean sitting with that anxiety and those other negative feelings afterwards, which is where my article and video on anxiety management would be really good to watch, because I do go into detail about ways in which you can manage this anxiety and instead of responding to it, distract from it or work through it, and we'll give suggestions as to how to sit through it and not do something harmful to yourself, and actually be able to work through it and use healthy coping mechanisms to manage that intense anxiety and other negative emotions that you will experience after having fear foods, because that's just how the eating disorder works. So yes, with fear foods, it is a case of do it. And I know that sounds so simplistic and invalidating to the fear that you experience, but I know I've been there and I've been through it, and it is, you have to do it. And again, watch my video on breaking eating disordered habits, because that's really what that's about. It's about that very simplistic, where you just need to do it, and it's more of an explanation about that and how to just do it, because really at the end of the day, as I say in that video, there's no magic answer. Nobody can do it for you. It has to be done by you. So yeah, I'm not invalidating how scary it is and how difficult it is, but at the end of the day, that is what needs to be done. So it, again, as I always say, it's really good to use any resources available to you, friends, family, doctors, therapists, dietitians, anything that you have that's helpful to you, and hopefully all of those things would be helpful to you, but we all know that it doesn't always work out like that. To help you and support you through this process of facing these fear foods. And obviously don't overwhelm yourself. I think there's a very fine line between not pushing yourself enough and then pushing yourself too much and it being overwhelming, and not pushing yourself enough because you think it will be too overwhelming. Because obviously it's really difficult to find where that line is, because your eating disorder will say, no, don't push yourself, this is too overwhelming for you, just don't do it. And we'll try and convince you not to face those fears because it doesn't want you to. And it's very easy to get caught between not knowing whether it's your eating disorder saying it's too overwhelming and stopping you from making progress, or whether actually it is just too overwhelming at this time and it's something that you have to work on. So there needs to be like plans around certain things, like how many fear foods you're going to face a week. It might be one every 2 weeks, it might be 2 a week, but it's really about where you are and where you feel you can manage, and it's about really being honest with yourself about what you can manage and what you can't, and what is eating disorder driven, trying to stop your progress. So really think about that when you're doing it. And also it doesn't have to be like, oh, I need to face pizza as a fear food, so I need to eat a whole pizza. That's not necessarily gonna be a good idea, because that might be too overwhelming. So for example, you might want to go for eating 1 slice of pizza, and then the next time you have it would be 2 slices, and the time after that 3 slices, you know, just working up to these fears in a manageable way. So we all know that if you're really, really, really scared of pizza, eating a whole pizza is probably going to be a bit overwhelming. If you can manage that, that's fab. If that's what you feel would be a good way to overcome your fear, to just, you know, jump in the deep end. But for other people, it's too scary to manage like that much. So you would have one slice to get you going, and that's actually scary enough. And then the next time you just increase on it, and you know, whatever you can do personally. And before you start thinking that, you know, oh, I can manage eating half a pizza and that person can only manage a slice, therefore they must be sicker than me. That's not the case. We're all different. We manage different parts of our recovery differently, and some parts are harder for some and some parts are harder for others. And we also just want to get out of this comparing, competitive, eating disorder driven stuff. So just focus on yourself and your recovery, and don't think about, you know, other people and what they're struggling with and what they're not struggling with and what you are in comparison to them, because that doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help progress. And we're all totally individual. It doesn't mean someone's sicker than another, and, you know, all that kind of eating disorder crap. Just focus on yourself and what you can do, because, you know, the faster you can do things, that is better for you, your health, your happiness. You want to be able to manage things as well as possible, because not managing is shit. So just do it at your own pace, but find that balance between the eating disorder saying, no, this is too much for you, and actually it being too much for you, and working at a pace that is challenging but not overwhelming. And that's really important. So I think that's really all I have to talk about. Obviously, if you want these topics expanded on, as I said, look at my anxiety management video or article on my website, which is everythingedrecovery.com, or watch Breaking Eating Disordered Habits, How to Break Eating Disordered Habits, for more details, more information on that kind of topic. But I hope that I have significantly addressed the fear food issue and kind of explained the anxiety process and what happens. I know it's very to the point, you know, you have to do it to do it. There's no other way. And I know it's more complex than that in your head, but logistically that is it. But I hope that kind of explains how the process is working in your head, and I hope my other videos will also give you some more detail on how to manage that. But yeah, I hope that everybody is doing well. I know this is always how I finish my videos, literally the same comment. You know, I hope everybody is doing well and that you're all fighting your eating disorders and challenging yourselves. And I know that, yeah, as I said, that's the message I always end on, but I really genuinely do mean it every time I say it. I really do hope that everybody is okay and managing, and that when you're not, you have adequate support around you to help you. And I do hope that you are challenging things and making progress. And if you're not, please do talk to someone so that they can help you to do so. So yeah, that's all for today, and I will speak to you soon.